Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? They say that you can tell just how important a politician is by how long it takes to organise to get them to turn up at something. So if you were to have, say, Joe Biden, who is in town, coming to London, probably would have been a year or so in the organisation. I know he feels very strongly about things like Brexit. Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, good 6 months or so. It's a long way from North Queensferry here. But when Charlotte and Sarah texted me this morning and said, "Look, what are you doing later? Will you come over to Hampstead?" I said I would be delighted because I'm on a bit of a mission to demystify Brexit. I've spent 2.5 years hearing Brexit means Brexit means Brexit means breakfast means Brexit, and listening to people say, I literally don't know what you're talking about, and I agree. And I think one of the challenges that we face in giving this country a better future is precisely to cut the crap and for people to understand actually what is at stake and what therefore they might want to get involved in. And I want to do that this evening through 4 very simple P's. I promise you not one of them is piffle. The first one is paperwork. Now, when people talk about Brexit, and you might see people talking about Barnier and all the negotiations, it can all look very confusing. But actually, one of the central arguments about Brexit is paperwork. It's the amount of paperwork that Brexit will generate, because it reflects the way in which we live today. Just take one of our major industries, the car industry, employing nearly 1 million people in this country. We're rightly very proud of the cars that we make in this country. But most of those cars are not solely made of British-made components. You might drive a British-made car, but you've probably got Spanish windscreens, German engines, Portuguese-designed seats. And that means those components need to come into the country to be put into that British-made car. Now, the great thing about being part of the customs union, central part of our relationship with the European Union, is that can happen like that. That's why we have a very efficient car industry in this country, the just-in-time process of delivery of those cars. That's why Brexit is such a challenge. Because as soon as you take away that customs union, as soon as you take away the single market that comes with it, you have paperwork. You have people being stopped at a border, asked what they're carrying, asked for the pieces of paper to confirm that. Now, I know Boris has told us that it's just like the congestion charge. And I've no doubt that you can speed up the process with barcodes. But when people talk to you about Brexit, ask them about the paperwork. Ask them about the small businesses in this country that trade under what is called the 13th Directive. It's about VAT. Fascinating subject. I promise you I was on the trade bill. The 13th Directive allows companies in this country to be able to reclaim VAT that they've incurred in other countries automatically. As soon as you leave the European Union, the 13th Directive is gone. And that means paperwork. And we know that paperwork means delays. That just-in-time production chain that allows us to make pizzas in the Wirral with Spanish tomatoes and Dutch vegetables on the top of them becomes a hell of a lot longer. Just a 2-minute delay at Dover would see the cars and the lorries stacked up for miles. An 8-minute delay and it comes back to the M25. And it's a very simple reason. It's paperwork. It's being able to check what is being brought into the country and what is going out of the country. So the next time that somebody tells you that Brexit is easy, ask them about the paperwork. Ask them what happens when the paperwork needs to change. Because right now, through being part of the European Union and the customs union and the single market, we have a common set of standards. But as soon as we leave, we have to prove we've met those standards. And as soon as those standards change, because inevitably they do, we have to get a whole new set of paperwork for people. Ask them what they're going to do with the 758 pieces of paper known as the treaties that we have that govern all of these relationships if we leave the European Union. So that very first P, when you're talking to people about Brexit, is paperwork. Simple as. I always listened to this government tell me that they were against red tape. I didn't realise what they meant was they didn't have enough of it. But that is precisely what Brexit will leave us with. But the second P, because it's not just about our economy and how we do trade, is people. We're very proud, I'm sure, to live in London. I think most of you do, in a city where 1 in 10 of our neighbours is a European Union citizen. 3 million European Union citizens in our country, helping us run our economy, serve our communities, being our neighbours, being our boyfriends, our girlfriends, our teachers, our friends, our family. 2 million Brits enjoy the same benefits through being in Europe. Being part of Europe has allowed us to meet people, make connections, make new friends, fall in love and learn and work around the continent with ease. Now I have to be honest, if I thought that young people in Walthamstow would have more opportunity to do that by leaving the European Union, I would be the first at Dover building that brick wall. But the reality is, it is the reverse. We have to stand up for freedom of movement because it has been our freedom of movement, our ability to make friends, to work, to study, to travel. And it's not just about freedom of movement when it comes to people. It's about our most basic rights. I am acutely conscious as somebody who campaigns on equalities issues that the vast majority of our rights are upheld in Europe when it comes to equalities, especially when it comes to women. It was the European Union that took the UK government to court when it wouldn't uphold the rights of pregnant women in the workplace. And when I listen to this government say, don't worry, when we leave the European Union, all your rights will be the same, I remember Beecroft. I remember exactly what their plan for what those working rights should be for women, for people in the workplace, for being able to sack more quickly. I know what the Working Time Directive has done for people in this country. And I know it takes those common standards, those common rights to protect people. And when we talk about people, we can't help but talk about what is going on in Europe right now. Because the honest truth is that the far right is on the rise. When we hear that Boris Johnson is getting text messages from Steve Bannon, it's not funny, it's frightening. This is a man who went to the Front National Convention and told them to be proud to be racist. This is a man who openly talks about building a network around Europe to promote far-right ideology, to take over the European Parliament and to destroy what he calls the European project. And we are seeing the result of those views already. I serve on the Council of Europe. I sit in the Refugee and Migration Committee. Over the past year, I have now had to come to terms with members of the AfD from Germany and the Five Star Movement from Italy being part of that committee, proudly defending not taking refugees, shrugging their shoulders as people drown in the Mediterranean, because that is a lesson they will learn. That's what they said. Those values, those ideologies are in our continent, and none of us who want a better progressive future for our country should brook any moment of doubt that it is a very serious threat to all our futures. But some people will tell you that that's why we have to let Brexit happen, because the country is divided. And I have to be honest, I knew we were going to lose the referendum when I saw a Somali woman in my local community in Walthamstow racially abusing a Hungarian woman during the referendum, shouting, "My daughter can't get a job, you need to go home." Both of them were in tears. Both of them I went over to speak to. It is true that this country is being divided. The people in this country are being set against each other, and the only ones who benefit are those populist far-right parties. You hear it in the way that people talk about Brexit being solely about immigration, solely about people's sense that the other was the problem in their lives. For me, that is all the more reason to stand up to those people and to stand up to the movements like Brexit that I believe they will use to promote that ideology. Because when I look in Europe and I see those ideas where they don't have Brexit, I know that they will not stop if Brexit happens. And I know the kind of future that I want for my children and my community does not rest in the mobile phone of Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's also about the possibility that we've had in this country for people of peace. It's an extraordinary thing when you work with young people to try to explain to them that 20 years ago we had civil war in this country. We had a conflict in Northern Ireland that meant that communities were set against each other, that there were bombs, that there was fear, that the Good Friday Agreement is not just a dry piece of literature, it's a symbol of the kind of country and the kind of world that we can be. And yet, to hear the Brexiteers talk about the Good Friday Agreement as though it's something you can throw away from another area, rather than fundamental to the possibilities for the people of Northern Ireland, is extraordinary. So the second thing in this debate, after paperwork, is people. Don't ever let people not be centre stage and what this will mean to their lives. The possibility of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the return of civil unrest is very, very near by the way things are going. And then finally, the final two P's sort of fit together, because the final one is politics. See, I don't actually think that the referendum was about immigration. I think it was about people's sense that the world wasn't working for them. So why not vote for the thing that people are telling you will be a problem? Why not support something that feels like it will really lead to change? And I don't think anybody, frankly, who voted Leave or Remain really knew what would happen, what was on the table, what was at stake. What I recognise now is that politics has to rise to that challenge. Because frankly, I don't think the problem is immigration. I think the problem is politicians. I think it's politicians like me not doing our jobs, not planning properly, not helping people cope with change. Look, I've got jumpers older than the internet. The world is moving very, very quickly. And it is right and understandable that people feel frustrated when our political systems do not keep up with that. But the point about politics is it's not a one-off. Democracy didn't stop the day after the referendum. This is not, for me, about going back to 2016. It's about what happens next. And just as if I were a trade union negotiator with a deal that I've walked out with my community, I would then go back to them and ask, is this what you wanted? So I believe it is right in that practice of rehabilitating politics that we stand up for the principle of saying, yes, we've had a referendum. Yes, we need to look at what leaving the European Union looks like. And now, well, now we know. So is that what you wanted? But we need to do that in a different way. I was in Dublin on Monday. I do a lot of work on, as I was saying, about women's rights in terms of abortion rights. Ireland has shown the way forward for how to start healing our political culture, because it puts people at the front of the conversation about how you do this. So the citizens' assemblies in Ireland have allowed them to have what could have been incredibly divisive, difficult conversations about key social issues for that country, about gay marriage, about abortion, in a way in which the people have led the conversation, not the politicians. And I believe that what we must have now is the opportunity of a citizens' assembly to look at what the question that should be put to the British public is in a final deal vote. I don't believe it is for me to set the terms of it. I believe it is for everyone to be part of that conversation and for us to learn from countries where they've brought people together to deal with difficult issues rather than pretending that you can't. And that's where the fourth P comes in. Because we can't have that process of healing. We can't have that process of saying, okay, what happens next? In 10 years' time, what will Britain look like? And is Brexit part of that future that we want? If we don't use our power. If nothing else, we've got to move away from the idea that 650 people in a place that looks like Hogwarts gone wrong are the answer to everything. And that means having a way in which 650 million people, 65 million people rather, in the British public, have their say. And each of you in this room tonight have the power to make that happen. Each of you in this room tonight have the power to convince people it is possible to talk about the subject that most people probably avoided at Christmas. Each of you have the power to convince people that it is right. Now we know what Brexit involves. Well, now we know we're not getting £350 million for our NHS. In fact, We've lost 97% of the nurses who were coming from the EU. Now we know 3 million jobs are at stake and we're seeing the economy stuttering. To be able to make that argument about paperwork, about people, about healing our politics through having difficult conversations in a way that is led by people. I can't do that alone. I can use my voice and my vote in Parliament, but this is going to take a movement of people in our country saying they want our politics and our future to be better. And yes, that means having a people's vote, but it means winning the argument for it street by street, community by community. Now, some of you are looking at me right now and saying, yeah, but come on, you're a Labour politician. And absolutely, the Labour Party, I am part of the campaign within the Labour Party to get the people's vote to be policy. But honestly, that isn't enough. It takes people being willing to listen, willing to debate, and willing to stand up for that kind of future they want to make this happen. But I wouldn't be here on a slightly sultry Thursday evening if I didn't think that was possible. And I think it's possible because I think that's where the public are at. They can see that a no-deal Brexit, when people are talking about stockpiling medicines and turning the M62 into a lorry park, and companies are pulling out, and then European neighbours are frightened. They can see that something is wrong, but they need more than opposition. They need an alternative. And each of us in this room needs to be that alternative, willing to listen, not talking about 2016, but talking about the next 50 years. Not saying, well, you didn't know, you were lied to, you made a stupid decision, but willing to hear what people were saying and saying, yes, okay, let's look at what now is impossible. Let's look at what this does mean for our communities. This is too important for people to walk away from each other, too important for people to let it be a divisive issue, because if we don't fight for it, if we don't stand up to those people promoting hatred and division and defeatism, who will? I'll stop there and I'd love your questions. Thank you.